Before I hand over to our Master of Ceremonies, just wanted to say a couple of things. Firstly, thank you very much for coming along this evening. As some of you may or may not be aware, Internal Audit Connections and CGS Search and Selection, who have organised this evening, have been working together for 3 years now. And on this, our anniversary, it's fantastic to see so many of you turn up tonight, so thank you very much. I also wanted to say thank you to ACL, who are partnering with us tonight, so thank you to those who have come along tonight. I also should say that we are trying to keep to sort of Chatham House rules system, because in order to make this informative for you, we want people to be as open as they can be. So some of what you hear tonight may well be confidential, and equally some things that you may reveal in questioning may be confidential too. So please remember that. And also, if, as you see, we're filming this, if you feel something should be removed, please just let us know, and we will edit that out before it's made public. So that's everything from me. So I shall hand over to our Master of Ceremonies, Bruce Vincent, who has kindly agreed to organise tonight, or host it even. So I hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see some familiar faces in the audience. These seminars have proven over the years to be very, very good events, not only for networking, but for the topics that we cover as we go through the years. And obviously tonight's topic is a very important one, a very timely one, data analytics. I don't quite know why Guy and David asked me to moderate tonight. I certainly didn't organize tonight, but thanks for saying that anyway, David. Because my knowledge of data analytics is limited pretty much to the limited success I had implementing it at my last two companies, SAB Miller and Intercontinental Hotels Group. They've since made some strides. I took early retirement from IHG a year ago. So I think that's probably one of the main reasons I'm here tonight, because I have time on my hands in between my travels. But it's nice to be back in the internal audit world for an evening, at least. So I did a little bit of research today to try to at least be have somewhat of a vocabulary about what we're talking about tonight. And one of the first articles I came across was entitled, "What Lady Gaga Can Teach You About Data Analytics." And honestly, it was the first thing that came up on Google search, so have a look tomorrow. It's a good article. Not really. But it did say that she uses data that comes from her website, which is called littlemonsters.com. Do we have any little monsters in the audience? I guess not. Anyway, it's not a Lady Gaga crowd. Not that I'm a fan, okay? I'm not a little monster. But she uses data from that website to do things as detailed as managing the playlists for her concerts depending on the musical tastes and the popularity of her various songs in various locations. So she actually manages to her crowds in a very direct way. So if Lady Gaga can do it, we can do it, right? No offense to Lady Gaga, but she is a singer. And she's a bit odd. I sing occasionally. But anyway, we don't have Lady Gaga here tonight, but we have a very distinguished panel of experts, people who do know what they're talking about as opposed to me. I'm here to moderate. Our format tonight is going to be that we're going to let each of the 5 speakers speak for about 10 minutes. At the end of their individual sessions, we'll open it up to a bit of Q&A for that individual. And then at the end, we'll have hopefully around 15 to 20 minutes for an open Q&A session with all 5 panelists. Okay? So without further ado, we'll get started. Our first speaker tonight is Renata Sanfona from EY. She's a practice lead in data assurance. She's been with EY for 12 years in IT risk and controls. And she works with FTSE 100 clients in the delivery of audit analytics. So she's got some specific experience to tell us about tonight. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Renata to talk about SAP Analytics.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. And firstly, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to share some of my experiences with you tonight. I hope what I bring tonight will be valuable. I thought I'd start off tonight with just a bit of a background about myself and my experiences and how I found myself in the data analytics world. So I started off 12 years ago at Ernst & Young in the advisory practice, focusing on business process and controls. And after a few years, my role evolved into the ERP security and controls practice, where I was focusing on the more automated elements of controls, both in an assurance and advisory capacity. About 4 years ago, I was approached by our leadership to ask me to join the SAP Audit Analytics team. And they were undergoing an initiative to really build out SAP Audit Analytics. And this was where we'd be bringing our audit capabilities together with the ERP skills, and then bringing that together with the analytics to build out new and innovative ways of auditing for both internal and external audit clients. At first, I was quite apprehensive about the role, and that was just because I had studied a course on SQL probably 13, 14 years ago at university, and I had no prior analytic experience, so I was a bit nervous about it. But after a very, very short time with the team and a very, very steep learning curve, I started finding that I was playing the role of the bridge or the translator between our assurance teams, our audit clients, internal audit clients, and also the analytical team. And I was almost a translator between the two, so able to communicate both in an audit speak to our auditors, but then also translate their requirements and bring that back into the analytics team, and really bridging that gap between the two. I also spent a couple of months with our EY Global Audit Methodology team, and the focus of that was really looking at how we could really change the way of working, bring in new and innovative ways of auditing, increasing audit quality and effectiveness, but through the use of analytics. So I spent a lot of time with them trying to answer the question, well, what changes and what's different about auditing with analytics? Although my focus tonight my focus has been around SAP, I believe that the lessons learned and some of the things I'll be sharing with you tonight will be transferable regardless of the platform or the IT that you're using. So thinking about the key lessons, I could really share a load of horror stories, and there are a lot. So I thought I'd kind of think about the key 3 areas that I'd really want to focus on tonight, and those are really around expectations management when embarking on an analytics initiative. The second key message around not underestimating the change management aspects of auditing with analytics. And then the third is really I wanted to share some of the thinking that we've gone through from a methodology perspective and really trying to answer from our perspective what we've done to change the way we audit. So thinking first about expectations management, and I'll give you some practical examples of where it's gone horribly wrong on our end. But I think one of the biggest challenges we have is that often people think that the use of audit analytics will make an audit more efficient. It's going to highlight a load of insights at the same time, and also it's going to be reducing the overall cost of audit. And this is a big misconception and something that needs to be managed really upfront. One of the key things is around really understanding why we are going down an analytics initiative and what is the purpose of the analytics. Are we looking to create efficiencies in the audit approach and drive down audit cost, or are we really looking at finding efficiencies elsewhere within the business? So reducing cost of processing, or finding efficiencies within a process that you can bring. So the value add piece. And often this needs to be driven down from heads of audit, or the strategy needs to be really clear and communicated, because you could be embarking on a very long, expensive journey. My experience has also shown that initially in the first year or two, rolling out an audit analytics initiative is really, it doesn't produce great results at first. And also it can be more costly because you're having significant significant investment in time and cost in getting it right. An example that I'll share is probably on the very first client that I worked on. It was a disaster almost from beginning to end, but we got there in the end. I think one of the things we hadn't estimated up front was really the time and investment that it took to get through the IT hurdles or the IT, hula hoops. We hadn't appreciated the amount of time that was required to get the correct access, to identify the correct systems from which we would be sourcing the data, going through data privacy and data security hoops. So there was quite a lot of investment, and just to put it into perspective, it took us almost 2 months just to get the access to the technology right. We then went in and we performed our data extractions, and again, this became the second hurdle. We didn't get it right the first time. We got the data back, and as we started to try and run our analyses, we found we were missing parts of the puzzle. We were missing things, we needed to go back, we needed to go and get the right data. And in this case, it took us 4 times back and forth to go and collect additional data to build a meaningful analysis. Again, adding on another month to the total time that we've taken. By the time we had eventually run our analyses, I think the next thing that we didn't really do well, and something we again underestimated, was understanding who within the business was going to be able to help us to make sense of the analysis. Make sense of it in the context of the business. Who had the answers to the key questions when we were following up and investigating. And we went through levels and levels and levels of people until eventually we managed to get to the right person to provide the insight. And this is something really upfront you should be thinking about. Who are the people that will be impacted by the analysis? Who are the users of the analysis? Who are going to be receiving the output? I think the next point, which kind of leads into my second lesson learned, was around the time and effort it actually took to get our audit teams or the auditors familiar with what is happening or what we are trying to achieve, and getting them into a completely different mindset. I often see, when I run this with a new audit team, quite often, is you'd give them a results dashboard or something electronic. It looks new, it looks fancy, it's got a lot of exciting, charts and graphs. But within a couple of minutes, what you do find is that people start clicking into graphs and data, and they find themselves lost in mountains of data, and then sort of getting a bit nervous about it and not being comfortable with what the results are showing. It's a particular challenge also because you're trying to really shift the mindset, and people almost go back into sampling without understanding, okay, well, what does this mean and how is it different? One of the key ways that we've managed to bridge that gap is really by starting earlier, starting smaller, and then bridging out from there. So, we don't try and be adventurous and kind of just throw data at it and try and automate everything. Starting on very small areas, getting that right, and then building out. We also have somebody like myself playing the role between the auditors and the analytic teams, but really pulling them together as far as possible so that the auditor actually understands what is the question of the data I'm looking for, what is the procedure I'm trying to perform, and how is the analytic actually built. I had a horrible experience last year where one of our auditors took a result of an analytic and attempted to have a client discussion or with somebody within the business, and only to run back saying that the analytic is wrong, there are false positives, and nobody is trusting the data. And this almost had an impact on the integrity of the end-to-end analytics piece, and there was a lot of mistrust, and you land up having to build up all of that trust. And a lot of this was through his lack of understanding of what was trying to be achieved, how the system, the process, the IT elements of SAP work, to make sense of the data. What are the questions being asked? So I think finally, just because I'm going to have a time check soon, I just wanted to share some of the ways and thinking that we've had around what changes and what's different. We've we are looking at using analytics through the end-to-end audit process. So all the way from, doing risk assessments, scoping and planning, through to testing. So what we've started to do is we are looking at very high-level financial data, maybe summarized financial data, master data, configuration or user data upfront, and we perform some very quick risk-focused analytics. This is really helping us to identify key locations, key processes, key entities where there are high-risk issues in helping us to determine and plan the audit scope. Once that's been done, and we've also agreed on what we're aiming to achieve and where we're going to be focusing, we perform our analyses, and we start using the results of the analyses in our execution of audit walkthrough procedures. And this has been extremely effective compared to doing the traditional sample of one. And this process has really shown a lot of our audit teams that there are things that they have missed when they are going through taking the sample of one, not fully understanding sub-processes or key controls and overlooking a lot of that through the process. So they're ultimately using the analysis to validate their understanding of the process without performing detailed walkthroughs. When it comes to testing, one of the key things that is effective that we find is also that we are able to centralize the testing as far as possible. So we're able to reduce cost in audit teams going out to audit sites where it's unnecessary because either there is no key risk there, or when they do travel out to audit sites, we are limiting the time that they spend there because they have the answers up front, they know the key questions, and they know what they're looking for. So that's particularly effective from planning site visits and a cost reduction. Other than sort of focusing on really high-risk transactions and bucketing, so instead of investigating 1,000 transactions or exceptions, we are able to bucket it into smaller categories, and we're asking the key questions around why does this transaction or this group of transactions behave in a certain way. And we're able to narrow that down, so you might be looking at 4 or 5 key areas rather than a full population of transactions. We also use the analytics to reperform some of the key audit reports that are being used. So if you think of a debtor's aging report, we are reconstructing that from the data. So that gives us greater ability to assess the integrity of key reports that are used to operate key controls. Just the final point before I close is just, the use of analytics doesn't mean that you stop doing things. You're just performing the audit in a very different way. And it's not free of challenges. We do have issues where if data is not captured into a system, your analysis is quite limited. Where there are manual controls or manual procedures or very high judgmental areas, a lot of that, still needs to be considered perhaps in a lot of traditional ways, and where you can use the analytics to help support some of that judgment. But we still have challenges around some of that. So I think we've kind of gone through a journey, but I've tried in 10 minutes to gather it all. So
that's great. Thanks, Renata. Obviously, your perspective is quite interesting because you've had the experience of applying or attempting to apply analytics at a variety of clients or a variety of industries as opposed to just one company.
Yeah.
When you talk of the auditors that you support, are you talking about internal audit teams or external or both? And what's your experience there between the two?
So the focus is really on both, and the application will be quite similar in a lot of ways. I think from an external audit perspective, what I am finding now is that a lot of our clients are going towards the analytic route, and they are starting to make use of it, and the expectation really is that the external auditors will be placing reliance on the analytics. Some of our thinking around that and also challenges we have around that is we're able to place reliance on analytic procedures. It makes from our end, the cost of audit a lot, it reduces our cost of audit. But that is only really successful when we are able to align the analytics to key audit objectives. And then also having traceability of the investigations that have been performed. So clear evidence and documentation around the follow-up procedures that are performed when unusual transactions and items are found. So once we find that, and some of the big clients I've worked with have implemented control service centers that are primarily focused on doing this. And where they are doing this effectively, it really has a significant impact on the amount of work that the external auditor would have to do.
Okay, great. Any questions for Renata from the audience?
How's your projection? Yeah, I've got quite a few questions, but I think the main one is who's actually deciding what questions you're going to ask? Because in the danger of analytics, you come up with a lot of answers, but there's nobody to sift through those answers. So what's the driver for what is it key controls on?
Yeah, so how we've gone about designing our catalogue of analytics and also providing guidance for audit teams is really taken it from a risk and assertion perspective. And what we've done is we've got sort of two categories of tests, if I put it that way. We've got tests that are aimed at reperforming part of the expected process where you would expect a control to operate, and those are aimed at directly identifying exceptions. So everything that doesn't follow that expected control or that process or control is flagged up as an exception. The investigation activities around those is really focused on the high values. We'll set a threshold, so you either bucket or look at the higher value transactions until it brings it below a certain threshold. The other type of analytic that we have is a profiling type analytic, and that's really things like trend analysis or profiling the data in certain ways to enable us to say, does this fit with our expectations of what should happen? So say, for example, we know that our client or the business has gone through a peak, or they've acquired a new business where we're expecting quite a lot of sales to come through a particular channel. We would set expectations in advance, saying we would expect the sales activity in a certain period to peak above a level. And if it has done that, then great, we don't do anything more. But if we see other trending where it doesn't meet our expectations, those are the particular areas that we focus on. So it's really much around setting expectations first and then validating whether the data matches those expectations.
One more burning question for Renata?
Hi, Tirumurli. Okay, go ahead. Hi, I wanted to find out the real value of data. Although data analysts can help the auditors, but obviously from independence and efficiency perspective, the real value is where you move towards continuous monitoring.
Yeah.
Because you want to mitigate your risk immediately.
Yeah.
What is your experience on it? Trying to advise your customers about that and thinking on the long term?
So continuous monitoring, continuous auditing, I suppose there's two different views. So one from an internal, one from an external perspective, which I can share. So I think on what I am seeing from a lot of our clients is that they are going through the continuous monitoring route. And this is where I was talking about control service centers being set up to really do that monitoring. Through tools like GRC and with SAP, etc., and it's really flagging error transactions, and it's very much performing real-time analysis, very similar to what we do, just that we are looking, in a larger chunk, perhaps, with extraction. Those clients are quite effective in managing and documenting a lot of the follow-up activity that they've done. And that's fantastic because you can go in and extract the report, you've really understood what's happening, and you can do corrective action as and when you identify exceptions or issues or deviations from trends. From an external audit perspective, we wouldn't do as much continuous auditing, because you do need to allow sufficient time for management to correct the action, to detect the issues, investigate and follow up, for us to evidence that the monitoring control is effective in effectively monitoring for exceptions. So I think from an internal audit perspective, again, it would be something where you would need to allow time for the control to operate to determine whether the investigation procedures are effective in kind of identifying those exceptions.
I think we've hit on a good topic there, and that is the confusion, if you will, between monitoring and auditing. Let's come back to that at the end, because that's, I think, one of the important distinctions we need to make. But for now, thank you, Renata. That was great. Cheers. So we'll move on to our next speaker, who is Tim Tam. He currently leads Baker Tilly's data advisory practice and has 13 years of IT and data advisory experience in the UK and Australia, having also run the internal audit data analytics team for the Commonwealth Bank of Australia and various other projects. So Tim is going to give us some practical insights. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Bruce. Hi, everyone. My name is Tim Tam, and I am from Australia, which makes it doubly unfortunate for anyone who's been there. As the introduction's gone, I am the Data Analytics Director for Baker Tilly. Just to give a bit of background about myself, I was trained at Deloitte in Sydney, was there for 3 or 4 years before I moved to ING, kind of as a cybersecurity auditor more than anything else, doing ethical hacking, attack and penetration work. Left there during the GFC. By left, got made redundant because ING got bought out. Went into banking, eventually found my way to Commonwealth Bank of Australia, where I took the data analytics team for the internal audit division. Cut my teeth a lot on data there before my wife said, we're moving to London. So I said, okay. Gave my old friends at Deloitte a call, came back. Did a lot of work with Deloitte in internal audit data analytics while I was there before I moved to Baker Tilly, where I am now, leading the team there, doing some similar stuff there as well. What I thought I'd share with you today is I am in this unique position where I have been on the external side. I have been on the internal side. So I can sympathize with a lot of the stuff that all of you guys are going through at the moment. I've seen it all. I've been in audit for so long now that I've seen the transition from, the really substantive-based testing to controls-based testing to risk-based testing to that value-based testing that never really worked. And now we've got this whole idea of data analytics. Seems to be a buzzword with a lot of the other buzzwords which are flying around. I mean, we've mentioned quite a few of them today. We've mentioned continuous auditing. We've mentioned continuous monitoring. We used to call it CATS. I don't know what happened to that. And now it's called data analytics. So there is quite a lot of confusion just for internal audit teams, which I've seen in the market in London as well, where we don't really understand what we're talking about. Everybody wants to do data analytics because everybody else is doing data analytics. But do we really understand what that means? Do we really understand what value that's going to add to our internal audit divisions? I think it's important now to really define what does data analytics do for my internal audit team? What is the value that data analytics is going to do to help me with my audit process? And the way that I always think about it is that data analytics will help me give a better level of assurance. As auditors, what is our job? Our job is to go there and give assurance to management about what's happening within their company. To either say, yes, the controls are working correctly, yes, there are problems, no, there aren't problems. Data analytics is one of the tools at our disposal to help us do that, to help us understand and to explain to management, I have done all that is in my power, using all the tools that I have at my control to give you the best level of assurance that I can give you. And that's really what we should be trying to do. And we should always keep that in mind whenever we start on a program of doing anything such as data analytics or whatever it's going to be, or whatever the next buzzword's going to fly out to be. With all that said, today I'm going to speak to you about how to build a sustainable and an effective analytics program. When I was at ING, analytics is not a new thing. Back when I was on ING, and this was going on 10 years ago, we used to fill out our audit program when we were starting a new audit. We'd do our audit planning, and there was a little tick box in the methodology that said, have you considered use of CATs? And what would you do? You'd tick, yes, I have. And then you keep moving on. And this is what, and this was 10 years ago. And this was CATs before we got the sexy name of data analytics. This was a long time ago, but we did it back then. And at the time, that's what I considered was the value of CATs data analytics. And I'm sure that's the same for a lot of internal audit teams within this room, within what I've seen in the London market as well. That's how we treat it within our internal audit methodologies. So I've seen a lot of different people try to approach this in different ways. And what I thought I'd present to you is a framework, because we consultants, we love frameworks, we love building them and delivering them, about how you can think about data analytics, how you can think about where do I sit and what I'm trying to aim for. So bear with me, we'll start with the maturity model. So if we consider the maturity of data analytics within your organization on 3 levels, at the very bottom, let's talk about ad hoc. So I don't plan to use analytics on any of my audits. If I'm doing an audit, I see a whole bunch of transactions, or this particular audit, wow, there's that spreadsheet with a whole bunch of data in it. What do? I haven't planned to do anything with that, but I'll pick it up. I'll ring my IT audit guy, because he knows how to use Excel, he knows about data. I'll give it to him and I'll ask him, can you tell me anything that's in this file? And he might tell you something like, I found a duplicate payment. And so, you know, this is, from the laughter, I know that this has happened to you before. That's ad hoc. You know, you don't plan to use it, but this is how it works. Let's go to the next level of maturity. And I call this integrated. It's integrated into my methodology. So I've thought about using analytics. I think that it's really worthwhile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plan to use it as part of my audit program. I will look at the whole audit universe that I've got. I'm going to identify the audit areas where I think that there's data there and that I can get some really good wins by using analytics. And so when I do one of those audits, not only have I identified, yes, I want to use analytics on there, but I will do my testing. I will plan to do my test of controls using some analytics tests to help me do that. Yeah? Top level of maturity. I call this top level, but we can discuss whether or not this is or not. And this is where I think it's where you have a platform in place. You have an actual software in place where you're running stuff through that to give me some insights into the audit that I'm doing. So I'll give you an example. I used to work at a bank. This bank had 1,000 branches across the country. One of the audit activities that we had to do was we needed to go audit every one of those branches over a 3-year period, because that's what you do as an audit function. You go and audit things. The problem was that we used to use this methodology where we'd randomly select branches to go visit. So, you know, I might go send some auditors in Melbourne, and I might go send some auditors over to Queensland. They might find nothing, but over in the Northern Territory, someone's doing fraud, or they're selling credit cards, or they're doing PPI, which I know is a problem in London, but not so much in Australia. But, you know, we were doing a scattergun approach. What we ended up doing is we built a platform. We called it a risk analytics platform, that we took common risk indicators across all those 1,000 branches. And we figured out, actually, there are certain things which make a branch look good, and there are certain things which make a branch look bad. So let's model that. So I had a statistical modeler, and he modeled that out. And what we ended up doing was ranking all our branches based on what was good, what was bad, all the way from 1 to 1,000. And using that, we were able to better inform our audit process. So instead of doing a scattergun approach, we used a risk-based approach to go out and target the branches which were of higher risk, and leave the branches which we knew, actually, based on the data that we've got, they look okay. So think about those 3 levels of maturity. Think about, where do I sit? Where does my organization sit within that list? And if you come out at the bottom that I do it ad hoc, don't worry. Most of the clients that I've spoken to are there as well. It takes some effort to move from ad hoc use of data analytics all the way up to the integrated approach, and even further to get up to that kind of risk platform approach. So that's the first thing. I also want to talk a little bit about what are the foundational things that you need to do to build an analytics practice. And these guys have talked about some of those things already. I'm going to put this into terms of my framework. So we're going to start with foundations. And the first thing is you need to figure out where you want to go. I've already explained that there's a maturity model. Choose a level that you want to be at. You might say, my organization is fine to be ad hoc. Actually, we're too small. I don't have a lot of data. The nature of the business that we do, we don't have that much data. I'm quite happy to leave it as ad hoc. I'll have a little bit of skills. If something comes up, I'll chuck it to the IT guys. That's fine. You might say, actually, I want to be integrated. I like the idea of planning to use analytics instead of just being ad hoc and using it like that. So I'm going to work out a way to get integrated, into my methodology, to use it, to plan to use it in advance. Figure out where you want to be on that scale. I'm just going to open my notes. I did write this down. This is a new framework. It used to be much bigger, but because I've only got 10 minutes, I'm going to give you a cut-down version. The second thing is, and Renato's mentioned this as well, what about data? What data do I actually have access to? Funnily enough, data analytics is based on the idea that you have data to analyze. So if you don't have any data, if you can't get access to it, if it's of bad quality, you can't do any analytics. We have to be very aware of that. I might say that I want to do a great audit of this particular transactional process that we've got. If that thing is all based on manual papers, where someone's sitting down and writing it down, they're using it and filing it in a filing cabinet, funnily enough, you can't do data analytics on that. You need to have data. You need to have access to it. If you want to do a analytics audit on, say, for example, if we take the lottery example, I want to do an audit of all the purchases of lottery tickets that are coming out of that system. If the manager of that system says, no, you're not touching my system, you try and query something like that, you're going to crash it, I'm not giving you production access, you're sunk before you even start. So you've got to figure out, what data do I have access to? What will they give me access to? What's the quality of that data? Is there any data there in the first place before you start doing anything else? The final one there is support. Do I have the buy-in, not of just my analytics team sitting in an ivory tower, but also of all my audit managers within my audit department as well? There's no good that I am really gung-ho. I'm the analytics champion. I'm the analytics lead. I think that analytics is great and that we should use it on every audit. But then all my audit managers are like, no, I don't like this data thing. I want to test things like I've always tested it. I don't want to go anywhere near that. You need buy-in. You need support. On the same side, and this is something which I've run across as well, if I don't have the support of upper management, if management doesn't want to support an analytics program, I'm never going to get buy-in. If I want to run a level 3 maturity, where I want to put a platform in, and nobody is going to give me the funds to do that, I'm sunk before I start. So 3 key things there when setting up your foundational of your analytics program. What do I want to do? What data do I have? And what support do I have? Yeah? Okay, now in terms of...
We're going to have to ask you to summarize.
Oh, am I running out of time?
Yeah.
Sorry,
lots of good information there, but
let me summarize quickly. Other things you need to consider is staff. So staff is very important. I used to run a team of 6. I had different types of staff, such as guys who could do SQL, guys who could do modeling. More than anything else, though, you need to be aware that it's not the people who can actually play with data which are important. It's the people who know about audit process and can think analytically. Those are the most important ones. Other than that, the other thoughts that I've got are make sure that you think outside the box. One of the main important things of analytics is it's not just about the data in one system. The power of analytics, and especially for audit, is when you combine data from different systems. So I'm going to give one example very quickly. I had a client which suspected they had a problem with their accounts payable. They didn't know why. They kept getting things approved, which really shouldn't have been approved because they were really weird. So they sent us in. From a controls perspective, it looked fine. Security was set up. Each user had a different role. There were 5 people in this team. If you raised a purchase order or whatever, it had to be approved by one of the 2 supervisors. Couldn't figure it out from a controls perspective. We downloaded all the data of all the transactions that went through and who did it. Then we decided, actually, let's match that data against something else. We downloaded the swipe card access for the building, and then we downloaded people who had logged into their computer. 3 sets of data. When we matched it up, we also downloaded some HR records of when people had taken annual leave. When we matched it all up, we found that one of the supervisors was approving stuff when they were on annual leave, they hadn't ever swiped into the building, and they'd never logged onto their computer. And the reason behind that was they had given their password to one of the members of staff so that they'd be more efficient when they did their approvals. So think outside the box. Make sure you think differently, because you can do that with analytics, and your analytics program will do much better.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Sorry to rush you on that, but we are running out of time. Right. So let's move on to our next panelist. We've got Behrouz Kaviani, who works with ACL. And probably doesn't need a lot of introduction other than the fact that he's got about 10 years of experience in software consulting and training. And he's going to talk to us about some of the current issues and how we can deal with those. So I'll turn it over to you, Bruce. Thank you, by the way, Mahendra. Yeah, let's get Mahendra.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce. I think you pronounced my name really well since you just met me. Hi, everyone. I'm Behrouz. I'm from ACL. As Martin said, everything that I was going to cover has been said. So I'm just going to say thank you, and we can, no. It's really, I'm just going to reinvent things as I go along now, because they've covered everything that I wanted to touch on, which is great. It's really great for me to be last, because I get to reflect on everything everybody said, but I run out of material. So I'll start by telling you about myself. I've been with ACL for about 4 years. And my background originally wasn't through audit, but I've learned a lot since I've joined ACL. And it's interesting because I've also just moved from Vancouver to here. So I've had most of my career in audit management, auditing, and selling the software in Vancouver. And I've only been here for about a month and a half. And I find sometimes maybe the verbiage is different, or maybe the context is different. So not only do you have to put up with my accent, but you're also going to have to put up with the context sometimes, right? So just bear with me. A lot of the things that I find really matters have already been mentioned. You know, when you take a look at putting data analytics into place, most of the time the clients that we talk to, they have Microsoft Excel, and everybody's familiar with it, and everybody loves it, and it's free. You know, everybody has a Microsoft corporate license kind of thing. And you know, some people have a couple of specialized folks in SQL because that's a database they work with, and some people have an Access database, and that's what they work with. So a lot of times I find when we have a conversation with someone is the education of how to put a data analytics into place is very important. The maturity model. Now we have a 5-stage. You mentioned the 3 stages better, shorter period of time. That's good. Looking at being ad hoc, looking at what data do I need. Before that, seeing where do I want to start according to maybe some of the trends that I'm already seeing with the analytics that I have done or the questions that I have asked before I start choosing what data do I want to ask for, testing those data to see that I have the right data components, and then start to ask my questions of it. And of course, we like the fact that we're data agnostic. We like the fact that you can pull data from any data system, bring it into our interface, and then ask the question that you want. So you're not limited to one set of data or one part of your universe, if you will. But that has a lot of challenges that comes with it. Talking to all those different folks, getting the right to access that data, proving to them that that data is secure when it pulls out of their system. That's a very important thing to tackle. So, and then there is this idea of bringing in outside help to help you get the buy-in from management. So I'm part of solution consulting with ACL, and I've talked to IT about database security or SAP authorization levels, and I've talked to CAEs about how we can help you point, you know, the radar at the right area and say, this is the area that I'm going to ask questions of first. I'm not going to, quote unquote, boil the ocean, but I'm going to pick a little area, and that's where I'm going to start. So, you know, ACL's been in data analytics for over 25 years, and it was built on the idea that you might not have a tech-savvy person in your program or in your audit group. But you're going to have somebody who's going to see a tool that's point-and-click graphical, and in the background is keeping a log of everything that you're doing. So when you do need to prove why is this important, you can show them automatically an audit trail of how you got to the place that you got at. And it's a very English-driven language, so when folks hear scripting or programming a report, VB and SQL, you know, queries come into mind. And if you're not technically, like I was technical, so when I saw ACL scripting language, I said, you call that a programming language? And everybody said, no, that's not a programming language. That's a scripting language, because it's a very easy, simplistic interface to work with. So it's really meant to empower you to build data analytics in. But we don't ignore and forget the process and the structure that you need to put into place to be able to make that effective. Now, when you start on an ad hoc basis, you start with something like analytics 11, which is the latest version of our desktop, or if you will, that ad hoc siloed version of data analytics. And as you grow and you build your program, you build the right data connections, you prove to them that ACL is a read-only interface and that the security and the integrity of data exists, nobody can change it. When you start building some different queries, when you bring in, whether it is an outside help or an ACL consultant to help you figure out where you need to go, then you can move it and grow that program and put in the server into place. So now you're moving into an area where you can have automation, you can have repeatability, you have a secure environment where you bring data in from different data sources and data systems, and you can prove to the IT and legal and compliance that this data is housed in a secure environment and is not going to people's laptops or desktops anymore. So if somebody walks out and takes their laptop with them, the data is never leaving the organization, let's say. So there's a lot of assurances on security that's built into this platform. And then from there, you start looking at continuous auditing, continuous monitoring. So I won't go down that path. We've already talked about it. But this system that you put into place basically enables you to do as little or as much of that as you'd like to. Now, there was something that was touched on a little bit is when you want to choose where you're going, sometimes you don't have a data analytics into place. You don't have access to a lot of data, or you might get a couple of PDF downloads and a couple of Excel downloads on how do I make sense of this. So sometimes what's your best way to start figuring out or ranking what are the areas I should go to? We've coined it human analytics. And it's basically the idea of maybe going out there and getting some self-assessments, going out there and asking questions of people, saying, I want to know how this is operating in your area. They don't even know that they're involved as part of your risk assessment process, but we're doing it in the background. So when you take a look at the solution that ACL provides today, ACL GRC, there's a lot of capabilities in there, whether it is that you want to do a top-down approach where you take a look at organizational-wide and you know some very high-level risks, and you want to assess them. So you pick key control owners and business owners, and you send them surveys and questionnaires that are properly geared as self-assessment tools. And then that drives down your audit plan, what area you're going to target, and so on and so forth, all the way down to that data analytics part of the world that you can automate and ask questions of those key controls and use the findings of your data analytics as supporting material for the findings that you have. You can do it the other way around, where you send those surveys out, when you ask those questions, and then when they come in, the system automatically has triggers into place according to the questions that you've asked that says, this area is popping up as, these folks who are working here maybe don't have the education that they need to, or maybe they don't have the training that they need to, or maybe the resources that we have allows too many things to be manual input versus an automated selection of criteria as they're going through. So you can start highlighting where are some of those areas that maybe I want to identify as a risk area, or maybe I want to identify as an area that I need to put a program around to actually now go audit it, build a plan around it, and then do data analysis against it. So the solution is meant for you to be able to take a look at this process, and whether it is that you're at the infancy of it and you need outside help to help you gauge where you want to go, or whether it is that you're somewhat in that maturity level, but you have different tools to bring it all together and make it easy for you to continue growing in that process. And I like the idea that first you need to start walking before you boil the ocean, so the ad hoc before the automated. I know a lot of times when you see ACL and I'm saying this is the whole solution, I would like to tell you the whole solution. But the truth of the matter is, what I would rather is that you're successful with what it is that you get. And it's very true that if you try to do it all at once, it's just not going to work. You can't fly a jet plane unless you go and take the classes first. It's just as simple as that. This is a very purpose-built platform, and it's very powerful. But you need to know how to utilize it and how to implement it in order for it to be successful. So the biggest thing that I want you to remember is that a lot of times when I talk with clients, when they tell me that they have some tools into place, or for example, if they have something like a BI type of tool into place, I want you to know that those tools can coexist with ACL as you're implementing it and you're getting stronger in that program until you get to a place where you can make ACL the central tool and build on the strength that it has. And when you have something like a BI tool like Martin was talking about, that is a very powerful tool that is meant to be able to achieve things that ACL cannot. And it's the same way as Martin says, then there are some things that you want to do that a CL can do, that a BI tool cannot. Looking at the little needles in the haystack, whether trends over the entire population of your transactions and how the business is doing are very different things, and you have different tools for that. But there's no reason why those two cannot coexist and work with each other. So I've worked in environments that BI tools point out some of those strategic areas that we need to take a look at, but we have a live ACL environment that's pulling all that data and is preparing it. And when I see a problem, I can almost be proactive. Pass a couple of parameters to the system, and it shows me why are the reasons that I'm seeing those blimps in my BI tool. So it can be a very powerful collaborative tool as well. Now, one thing, I don't know, sometimes I find when we talk about collaboration, sometimes when we talk about, you said that sometimes you push out after you build part of the program. Not all organizations are at that place. Some organizations like to have audit as a siloed function for very good reasons. But we find if you get to the layer where you pass the testing to that particular function, so they own the testing and they own the follow-up and remediation of the issues that they're finding, the kind of value that you instantly put in their hands, it's amazing. But on the flip side, when you go higher and you look at the executives or the board and they want to have visibility, you don't necessarily have to show the details of the exceptions. What you need to show is at a level where you say, here's the cost impact that we've seen in these kinds of anomalies, and that's all you need to show. You're not breaking out of that silo, but now you're creating this collaboration. And when you think about the compliance officers and you think about the regulators and the kind of visibility that they need to have to see what you're doing, when you build it in that kind of a platform, you can still collaborate, but you can still segregate the functions that you need to the level that you need to. I don't really want to go into detail, but when you look at the solution that ACL puts into place, you have that capability. You have your teams, whether it is in the data analytics or whether it is in the greater GRC function, where you can completely build a silo of what you need to do and then choose exactly what visibility and what amount of that content you share across different peers and going up the chain. And that's really powerful when you look at big programs like anti-bribery, anti-money laundering. I'm starting to learn about conduct risk now. It's like a new thing since I moved to UK that I'm hearing about. And if you look at the underlying framework that you need to put into place to be able to achieve something like that and avoid fines or make sure that when the external auditors come in, you have this program into place so they can take a look at it and know what it is that you're doing instead of them have to do it for you. It's a very powerful tool, and it will enable you to slowly but maturely get to the place that you want to.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. That's great. You've done my job for me. You've summarized it all brilliantly. Thank you very much. I think you made some very, very good points there. We've got some time for questions. I know we surely have some questions. It's been a while before I've turned it over to the audience for questions. So who's got the first question? Yeah.
Hi, thank you very much for that. Just a quick question around, I think one of the issues that we talked about is getting support from management, which is really the crux of the issue in getting the investment in, etc. I guess my question is more related to often management want to see the black and white. They want to see what's the money going in and what's the investment and what are the benefits. So they want to see quantitative investment, they want to see the output from that. Basically it has to be tangible. So I guess my question was more around what kind of model or how do we present the investment, because you can say we found a duplicate or we found the trend here or we found something that's not quite right, but it's difficult to quantify that. So how does the panel in their organizations, how do they present that kind of cost-benefit challenge, so to speak?
Okay, who wants to take that question? Go for it. Go ahead, Renata.
I mean, I think it's linked into one of the things that I mentioned up front, and it's just really what is the intention around the use of the analytics. So, part of it is around, are we looking to detect and focus on specific areas of risk? And are we looking to reduce total cost of audit, for example? Or are we actually looking to use the analytics to bring insights into the rest of the business where we could look to improve efficiency, reduce cost, improve process? So again, it depends on what the objective of the embarking it on. And one of the recent sort of pitches I was working at was really saying, you could use analytics to reduce the cost of audit by, say, 10%, or you could actually increase the cost of audit, but therefore look at larger value reduction in other parts of the business and other wins and improvements. So that's a thought around how you would be selling it or getting in that investment from others. So I don't know.
From an internal audit perspective, I ran into this problem before where management doesn't think it's worthwhile. Actually, the whole audit team doesn't think it's going to add any value. And one of the things which is really useful is run a trial. Find a friendly audit manager, and make sure that you are going to get some good results out of it. Easier said than done, but run a trial and make sure it's successful. And once you've got one, which is really good, you will end up with more work than you know what to do with, because people will see the value out of it. People will say, actually, that was a really great result. There was some really great analysis there, which I never got from my audits. I want that. I want to be the star, which I can show to my auditees that I can get this sort of insights out. So find a friendly audit.
I would agree and echo those comments. It's a classic catch-22, isn't it? That until you've proven there is an issue, you don't get the funds to address the issue. But in order to prove the issue, you've got to have the funds in the first place. And I'm sure all of us have had that experience in a corporate environment where there's scarce resources. So it is finding, as it were, almost backdoor ways to demonstrate that either beyond any doubt or certainly on the balance of probabilities, there really is potentially an issue, whether it's in your accounts payable, whether it's potentially sales fraud or whatever it might be. And it seems to be one of the things that I thought has come out of this discussion tonight from the five of us is a common theme of there's plenty of evidence to say this will help protect you against fraud. It will save you money. I do know, I was actually at a seminar yesterday where the CEO of Graze.com, who send out those parcels of healthy food, he was talking about the infrastructure of data analytics, and he has the data analytics team, separate, independent, reporting direct to him. So he can ask them a question on whether it, a sales issue or something like that, but also say on production issue, and one of that is allowing him to, for example, determine exactly what is the most efficient way to run his production lines. And again, that's an area of data analytics that potentially we as internal auditors might not have really pushed our minds into. But fraud is one thing, but if you can start talking to an operations director or a CEO about how data analytics can improve the efficiency of their production, then you may well find you get quite a lot of airtime.
Okay. Yep.
Sorry, I'm Paul Lloyd-Smith. I work with Baruz at ACL. Just on the point you raised about getting buy-in, what we do tend to do quite a lot with customers is we'll set up a proof of concept, and that proof of concept is usually on the customer's data. So we'd probably look to use your own data to set up a small number of tests within a certain area which has been identified, certainly where a process has already been identified as not working correctly or where there is a problem somewhere. If you can focus on that area with a proof of concept with ACL, we can certainly, this is how we interact many times with customers, we'll show the value within that small proof of concept, which will then enable you to get further buy-in to a full analytics platform.
Okay. Good.
Talking about is sometimes when that management who needs to make the decision, who owns the budget, sometimes we partner with them to have a conversation and say, what are maybe some of the pains that they have that you could help ease? And let's do a POC on that, or let's have a conversation on whether it is the amount of time it takes to do that, or whether it is the volume that we're covering versus what we could be covering, and then what could we uncover comparing to what we're uncovering today helps bring that ROI in very easily. So it is also that aligning yourself with the bigger risk or the higher levels pain and then helping them ease it that allows that.
And if you're really clever, you can make them think it was their idea. That's a nirvana I've never ever achieved, but I know it's out there.
Very good point. I think one of the most powerful arguments in my experience has been the ability to extend coverage. So regardless of what sort of monetary results you might have from the audit, the fact that you can go in and say, I can actually cover the entire population or a significant piece of it, that's a huge argument in favor. At least that's my experience. I think we've got time for one more. Nope, no more questions. No more questions. Right, but that leaves me to thank our panel for their time and patience and being willing to take questions. We're not a firing squad, but you are lined up ready, I think. Anyway, so thank you very much for your time. Let's give our panel a round of applause. So with that, I think we have more drinks on the way.